Hey guys, I'm back. It's my annual Halloween video. If you watched last year's and you didn't like it, there's no reason to watch this one because it's more of the same. Figuring that most people aren't going to go back and watch a video I did last year on the same thing, I thought I would do this year's Halloween video. And I have my new setup with my professional microphone, and last time I thought I figured out, using my mixer, how to record not only my microphone and voice in better quality, but the music coming from my stereo. Except this time it's not working. I don't know why. I have the lines from my stereo that's currently playing a CD of classical music in the background. And it was going into my mixer, and for some reason, I don't know why. But the sound from the stereo is not going into my mixer. And the lines work because I checked the lines. I don't know what's going on, so I don't know why you can't hear the music. And of course, I had that issue last time with the music being a bit too loud in the mix. Now I can't get the music to go into the mixer at all. I can't figure it out. I've got the inputs in there. I've got the volume up, and the microphone is working. But for some reason, the sound from the stereo CD player, my component system, is not carrying over into. I need an electronics person. I get Carm over here. Figure out what the hell I'm doing wrong. Or Colin. Colin knows. I don't know. The inputs are in there. I don't friggin' know why this isn't working. The inputs from the stereo were in there. The outputs are working, or else you wouldn't hear my voice. Anyway. Gonna do my Halloween video. Why? Because not only is it my favorite time of year weather-wise, but it's also my favorite holiday. Not really a holiday, but if I was going to celebrate a holiday, this would be it. It's my favorite. So, as of last year, I had a couple friends that are here. They're going to be in the background. That's Woody. You may remember him from last year. He will be in the background on the shelf back there in future videos. And I think I called him Brainy last year. Arg. Now this guy. Here's the thing. I live in a small condo, and I had him out last year, and actually smoke comes out of the top of his head, and his eyes light up. So if you really want to see that, you're going to have to go to last year's video. Now, this is how lazy I am. When I took him out for Halloween last year, I never put him away. He was actually sitting on my bathroom sink since last Halloween. And I decided to bring him out. I was going to fill him with water and light him up so you could see his eyes and everything. And guess what? As small a place as this is, I actually lost the electric plug that works the whole thing. I don't know, how could I lose it? It's such a small place. And I've only had him on this, I don't know where I put it. I looked in the original box he came with, so the electric plug isn't there. So if you want to see Brainy in full action with his eyes lighting up and smoke coming out of his head, you're going to have to look at my Halloween video for last year until I find it. I certainly didn't throw it out, but I have, and man, do I have a lot of cables and cords and electronics around here. I might never find it. As small as my place is, basically all of 2 rooms, I can't figure out where I put it. So Brainy's around. He'll be on the back shelf as well, somewhere back there, maybe up on there, in the future videos. I might never put him away again like I did last year. He's been literally sitting on my bathroom sink since last Halloween. So, he's back there. Going to show you everything, just about everything, because now I'm realizing I already forgot a couple things that I associate with Halloween. I had a couple vinyls that, one was a Ghost Story vinyl, and one was an old radio broadcast from the 1940s vinyl. I can't find them. Trust me, I didn't throw them out. Where the hell I could have put them in the small places beyond me that I lost them in a year. But I thought I would show everyone everything I have Halloween related that I listen to. And I'm sorry there's not music in the background. I mean, I've got the classical stuff on, but it's only going through my little bookshelf speakers. I don't know why the mixer's not working. The volume's up, the inputs are in. I checked the inputs, they're sending a signal. Why it's not going through the mixer, I don't know, because the microphone is going through the same mixer. Anyway, where am I going to start? I don't know. Everything I have that's Halloween related that I listen to this time of year, almost, except for the things that I forgot. And there's a couple music. I'm going to mention a couple music CDs that I showed last year that I don't have right here that have nothing to do with Halloween, and yet I associate them with Halloween. And one is Manuel Gotching, who is maybe better known as Ash Ra Temple, solo album called Dreams and Desires. It was recorded in '77, but it wasn't released until the early '90s. And there's a track on there, I think it's the track Desire. There's 3 long tracks on there. And it's got this sound in there that sounds like a ghost. Throughout the whole 26-minute piece, it sounds like a ghost going woo throughout the whole synthesizer piece. And I can't, ever since I first heard that, I thought it sounded like a ghost. And I'm pretty sure I played it on last year's Halloween video. And it's great. It's a great album anyway. But because of that, it's the first time I've heard that sound, and I thought it was a ghost. It sounded like a ghost flying around in my backyard. I've always associated that with Halloween, and that's one that always, I always get in the mood to hear. It's not even a conscious thing like, oh, it's Halloween, I must play this. It's just like the time of year comes, and I recall the ghostly cascade sound that stays throughout the whole 26 minutes of that track. The other one, another German group band, is Tangerine Dream. For some reason, Green Desert, oddly enough, you would never think that would have a Halloween association, and usually it wouldn't. As soon as the title suggests something, I usually go in that direction. So you think Green Desert, you think heat, and certainly wouldn't have anything to do with the cold weather of Halloween or anything. But it's just that I had bought that album, Green Desert, which is a bit of a mishmash. Partially, it was recorded in 1973 and not released. And then Edgar Froese, the leader of Tangerine Dream, did some updated recordings in the early 80s and released it then. So it's kind of a mishmash of 70s and 80s recording techniques when it finally got released in the early 80s. There's nothing Halloweenish about it except for the fact that I bought it, listened to it a bunch of times, so yeah, it's okay. I like that period of Tangerine Dream. Put it up on the shelf. And then one year, it just happened to be around Halloween, this is about 10 years ago now, that I took it off the shelf. And I started listening to it, and something clicked, and I really liked the album in a way that I hadn't before. And I played it night after night after night after night. And next thing you know, in my mind, I got that Halloween association, and then I ended up playing it every Halloween after that. It started getting to be that thing. There's nothing about the music that spells out Halloween specifically. But everything else that I have that I listen to around Halloween time has a real tie-in. And I've got a bunch of genres and subcategory things here. So in the way of anybody who's really old will know, have heard of Lights Out, which was more of a mystery radio program. But there's this company, there's a bunch of companies, but this particular one's called Radio Spirits, and they put out these old radio shows. And these, as you can see, if you can read it, from 1942 and 43, basically mysteries, but something I always get in the mood to hear when the weather gets cooler. A lot of these I'll play, all year long, but, there's something about when that cool weather settles in. And the Radio Spirits again. Here's 2 things. A werewolf story that was broadcast in 1944, and a version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde broadcast. This is American radio, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 45. How cool, and this came out in 2001. It's just kind of cool, and there's a box set that one's in as well, and it's got others in there, so I'll pull out the others. Here's a radio broadcast. This must have been cool to sit around the radio, back before people had televisions in their house, and just really, really turn out the lights and listen to this stuff at night. Here's a Frankenstein broadcast of the story from 1944, and another Frankenstein broadcast from 1955. That was on CBS station. 55 was also, before a lot of people had TV in their homes. And here's also, this old Radio Spirits company, I guess nostalgia company. Here's a very long, there's only one story on here. The Dracula story from 1938, a radio broadcast. Pretty incredible that somebody thought to save these recordings, and all these years later, not even have them on LP, but have them on CD. And another thing that I get into, I love these, and I love these. For me, there's almost, apart from listening to music, I like audiobooks, but especially in the car, I like listening to stories in the car. And I'm not even a big fan of fiction, so this is kind of where the fiction stuff falls for me more so than reading it. Tons of these. I put a whole bunch of these up. If you actually want to hear these in full, I put a bunch of these audiobooks up here in my YouTube page last Halloween. You have to scroll back a whole year. But these little cardboard envelopes, I came across these totally by accident. There's a company called Blue Diamond Audiobooks. Audiobooks on CD. Come in these little cardboard things. And I came across these in a Party City, Party Box. There's a bunch of stores that are similar to Party City, Party Box. And, they do all seasonal stuff. So in Halloween, they have the costumes and the special effects, fog makers, and all that kind of stuff. Anything associated with the holiday. And I usually go in there. I used to go in there, actually, when I had a job, and I had some money coming in, and would buy silly things to bring to the office, like sticky eyeballs, little plastic sticky eyeballs that actually stuck to glass and things like that. I'd always look around because I'm a big kid. And one of the things that I came across totally accidentally was these audio books. And these were like $2 or $3. Each one has 2 stories on. They're all fairly well-known stories. Bram Stoker, Dracula, Guy de Mustafant, I don't know how to pronounce it, but they've made movies out of a lot of his fantasy kind of horror stories. And, these were new things. This has got a 2000, actually, most of these that I'm going to show have like around the 2005 date on it. And these are a great buy for a couple dollars. They're just narrated, a little bit of an introduction of classical music. And actually, just about all of the ones I'm going to show, I think I actually put the stories up on my page if you want to hear any of these. Another one, these are all from this company, Blue Diamond Audiobooks. PC Treasures Incorporated. I couldn't find any information online about these people, though. I don't know if these are being made anymore. But they all run anywhere from like 36 minutes to 70-something minutes. They all have 2 stories on there. Great fun in listening. Not done tongue-in-cheek. They're very seriously read out, by the people reading them. They're not acted out like radio plays so much. They're basically the stories that are just read. And my favorite ones are actually the ones that you don't know, like not the Dracula type things so much as the stories that actually I like them all, but the stories that you don't know, like this one, Young Goodman Brown and the Ash Tree, 2 stories I didn't know by fairly well-known writers. These all came out in 2005, and $1.99 for that one, $1.99 for this one. Some H.P. Lovecraft, which that story I didn't know. The Yellow Sign. These things are great. Even they're functional. They don't take up any space with these little cardboard thingies. Tons of these. Nightwire is one of my favorite stories out of all of these. There's H.F. Arnold and M.R. James. These are, I don't know. You couldn't even buy these on Amazon. Oddly enough, these didn't pop up when I looked for them. Too bad. There's not one. Monkey's Paw is a very famous story. Ambrose Bierce is a well-known writer who wrote the second story on here. Yeah, I just eat these up, and it looks like I paid $1.99 for all of these, and these were new. This one is a bit of an odd thing because it's a scary story for kids, and yet none of the others are really geared really much toward kids. They're pretty seriously written and read stories. Like I said, not tongue-in-cheek at all. Including this one, if I remember correctly. The Raven, Edgar Allan Poe, where they read the... These are 2 of the more well-known things in the actual Legend of Sleepy Hollow, just the way they were written. Pretty cool. The Raven's really short because it's basically a poem, so it's 8.5 minutes. But the Legend of Sleepy Hollow is 72 minutes on here. And I also discovered these. The Naxos label that records kind of like budget classical music. They did a whole Classic Chilling Tales series. There may even be more than I have here. Each one each volume has 2 CDs in it, all seriously done stuff. Read by, most of these are read by actors that I'm not familiar with, but there's a lot of Irish and British actors that are younger actors, that are Shakespearean actors. So this is totally done serious. So there's, M.R. James again stories, O. Henry, that guy de Maisfont, I don't know how to pronounce his name, Rudyard Kipling, Edgar Allan Poe. These are all, and these CDs, man, they cram. Each one is almost 80 minutes long. And these guys are, they're serious actors, so they read with a great, like, dramatic flair, and, they raise their voice when they get excited and stuff like that. There's Volume 2, read by another Shakespearean actor, for this one from the UK. Another one, each CD is over 70 minutes. Edgar Allan Poe again, same bunch of people. Oscar Wilde, Charles Dickens, M.R. James, Ambrose Bierce. These things, man, I mean, even one CD running over an hour, if you got a long commute, this is, really, we're stuck in traffic. You can really, lose track of time if you want and get into these. This is Volume 3. I think I only have these 3 volumes. I think there's even more. All on the Naxos label, which is, like I said, a budget label. More stories from Ambrose Bierce, etc., etc. Another Shakespearean actor from the UK reading these, with their great dramatic flair. I don't know how much I paid for these. These weren't ultra cheap, but they weren't outrageously expensive, especially with what you get, Here's a little 3 CD set, kind of crammed into a little cardboard box, very thin, for 3 CDs. List price of $9.95. This is a lot the same of the ones I just showed. Classic Tales of Horror, read by, some, depending on how well you know, actors. Robert Forster, Juliet Mills. Stories by people like Robert Bloch, who you may know, Ray Bradbury. Susan Anspach, who, I don't know, people would know who she is, actress from the 70s. So this is a lot of fun. Again, this is serious, read short stories mostly, running from, one is 14 minutes, one is a couple of 50 minutes long, so quite long. 3 CDs for $10 of these things, if you like that kind of thing. I don't see what year. I don't remember when I bought these. I don't even see what year that was released. It's not incredibly old. A company called Phoenix Audio I've never heard of. When it comes to others, there's a mixture of silly. I buy these things blind, so a lot of these things, I kind of try to avoid the sound effects ones because they're just sound effects, and the ones that are really geared toward kiddies. But every once in a while, you buy some that kind of end up falling into that category. Here's one I actually bought in a store called Halloween's Greatest Stories by Edgar Allan Poe. They're not all Edgar Allan Poe stories, but this was a little more geared toward kids, that I found that after I got it. But I love the cover, and it's fun. It's Premature Burial, which was a story by Poe, Telltale Heart, The Pit and the Pendulum, basically just those 3 stories, and then it ends with a bunch of scary sound effects. They ended up taking the same CD a few years later and re-releasing it exactly with a new title called Tales from Beyond. The same exact Edgar Allan Poe 3 stories. There's a couple tracks of sound effects, and then they threw on 5 or 4 additional bonus tracks that are basically just sound effects afterwards. So you got stories, and you got a bunch of sound effects: demon dogs, hungry ghouls, lunatic laughter, storms in the night, kind of silly stuff. But I buy it for the stories, and these are all budget things, Another one, a lot in the same vein, kind of geared probably more toward kids, but they can be fun all the same. And again, they do The Raven from Edgar Allan Poe on here, and a bunch of stories that I think they wrote themselves, horror stories, Spirit Calling. See, I like his eyes there, and you really can't tell even in the glare here. The eyes kind of, the most expensive thing about the whole CD probably is the eyes kind of glow. And here's one that I ordered. This looks like the only place where you could buy. I bought this online somewhere really obscure, and it looks like it's actually sold by a company that in South Carolina that does walking tours, I guess, of like haunted places. And it's called Charleston's Tales of Terror, told by Tommy Dew, D-E-W. It's basically, I guess, stories kind of based in the Carolinas or the South Carolina area. And I recall it being very short CD, but fun, and just not a bunch of the same stories told over and over again. So I was kind of a sucker for this kind of thing, and I went for it. But this was hard. This was kind of hard to get. And I think it's actually, it's On the Market Tours is the name of the company that sells it. So I think it's more of like a tour thing, a bus tour type of company. And this I've shown before. And actually, I have this entire album also from about a year ago or more. I loved it so much I pasted all the individual stories up. And Carm has bought a copy of this based on my love of it. And I know I see my PC, which is dying very quickly.
Freezing up on me, so I may have some issues here. Ghost Gallery is a bunch of original stories, pretty much written by the narrator, Tom Willett, who's an actor. I think he's retired now. His name is Feature Man. He has a YouTube channel with thousands of subscribers where he does everything from tell stories about his Hollywood days to show you how to cook bologna and recipes. And he's a talented keyboard player, musician too. And there's a bunch of, this is one thing I did listen to all year, but it always has to get played at Halloween. And this is a great one for driving in the cars. All kind of like original stories. And very short, 4 or 5 minute stories for the most part. There's a little undercurrent of music coming from electric keyboards, and that was Tom doing the music as well. I know because I asked him. I told him how much I liked this CD, and I asked him about the music, and he said, yeah, I did the music as well. So basically, he's responsible for the whole CD. It's not on his record label. Somebody paid him to do this, actually. But I love this. I love the stories. They're fun. They're enjoyable. They're not really directed towards kids. But I love it. This is just one of my favorite CDs of all time. This is just so much fun, and it really brings out the kid in you. Moving on to things that were a bit more hit and miss. I've pretty much run out of stories. So I started buying anything. And this one, yes, was marketed as a kid's Halloween stories and songs. And honestly, it's a bit silly, and I haven't really listened to it for a bit, but I'll probably give it another spin. But yeah, this one is a little on the silly side. And others, I don't know what made me buy this one, because this I bought a lot of these online where I didn't have a lot of description of what was on them, and this Demonic Soundscapes is just pretty much sound effects. Pretty scary stuff. The kind of thing you would play if you had a haunted house out front for trick-or-treaters. But it's not stories or anything. And the vocal effects are kind of scary, but it's definitely in the sillier category. Same with this. I thought this was going to be stories because it says it's stories. It's not really stories. It's a narrator just saying, so we walked into the haunted house, and then you hear a bunch of haunted house things. And then we went to the haunted ballroom, and then you hear a bunch of ghostly sounds and things like that. So this one was a little bit, too on the silly side. But, I guess you got to have a couple of them in there. And a couple story-oriented ones, like I prefer, but that turned out to be fairly silly. I guess you could kind of tell as the title, but I bought them anyway. Around the fire with Uncle Guts. I guess this is Uncle Guts sitting around the campfire, telling about the stories about the Dracula, the birth of Frankenstein, the hitchhiker, the monkey's paw, famous story, the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, kind of his version of it. Kind of silly. If you're in the mood for it, fun though. And this is the same thing. The Old Grey Goose is very much in the same thing. You know, an actor very much playing kind of a silly horror movie character, telling kind of I wouldn't say gross out, but silly, tongue-in-cheek horror stories. The Butcher, Mystery Church, The Graveyard, Oscar, the Light-Headed Pumpkin. Andrew, after showing this last year, one of the guys that watched some of my videos, Andrew, actually bought this. I think he played it at work, and the people at work actually got a kick out of this. So that's a silly one, but you know, I think at that point I was running out of Halloween story things to buy. And then we get on to things that actually hit into the music area. Now everybody that listens to any Halloweeny stuff is, I'm sure, aware of Mannheim Steamroller, who's done several different music albums of Halloween music. Unfortunately, they put some sound effects on there which aren't really needed, because the music is pretty damn good. You know what they are is, you know, the Chip Davis, who's the Mannheim Steamroller leader, his kind of rearranged versions, a lot more up-tempo, of classical pieces that are associated with Halloween. Sorcerer's Apprentice, Hall of the Mountain King, that kind of Night on Bald Mountain, which I love, and that kind of thing. He's done a few different of these. So now we're in the music phase. I came across this group called the Halloween Ensemble, and what they are is, it's basically a group of classical music string players. My guess is that they're friends, and they're probably part of an orchestra, or maybe just studio musicians, but they could be people in an orchestra that kind of split off the orchestra, and every once in a while they record albums. I think they may have more than one. And there's not a hell of a lot of information on here about who's playing or anything. And there's just titles of the pieces, but no composers. And I think these may even be original compositions, geared toward sounding slightly mysterious. It's all classical. It's quite interesting, unusual. I came across this one totally by accident on a search. I had never heard them before, or heard any tracks of theirs. I talked about the cable station that I actually have on, that I'm taping 24 hours a day, that has if you have cable TV here in America, and you may have the music choice channels, which, you have one channel that plays, they're all music, and there's really little visual to it. They're still frame visuals, and they usually have fun facts about performers or whatever. They have a Sound of the Seasons during Christmas. They play Christmas music, that kind of thing. And during the Halloween season, they play Halloween music. Anything from soundtrack music to things like the Halloween series, like John Carpenter's music for the Halloween movies, to Michael Jackson's Thriller's vocal songs, oldies, Wooly Bully they play, which isn't really a Halloween song. They play Hall & Oates Man-Eater, which isn't really, Michael Jackson's Thriller. And they play oldies like the Purple People Eater, which always gives me a chuckle to hear. Spooky, if you know that old 60s song Spooky, who always makes me think of my late cat now, because I named him Spooky. They play little instrumental things from movie soundtracks. They play, every once in a while, they play some things from the Halloween sound effects albums, like Demonic Laughter and things like that. A lot of pop music. What amazes me is that there's a whole bunch of bands that I really didn't know about that are kind of like surf punk bands. They're current, or at least they were around in the 80s and 90s, that play this kind of underground music heavily inspired by surf, and a lot of echo and reverb in the recordings. And they would do, on occasion, they would do these Halloween sounding creepy things, and like the Vibrators and like the Cramps, bands like that. The two bands that they play that you may have heard of. There's a lot that are even more obscure, that are kind of these these weird surf, underground, kind of like druggy sounding. I think of these guys like, all being, heavy drug addicts when I hear their music. It's kind of really very, very dark and underground scene. Like I don't picture them ever even attempting to go mainstream. And they have a lot of that graphic feel, I think, of the Halloween thing. So they write a lot of songs that deal with those kind of subjects, and therefore they end up getting played on this channel. Here's a real interesting one. I think I bought this on Amazon. Music from Castle Dracula. They claim on here, even though they don't list musicians, that this music was actually recorded in Transylvania in Dracula's castle, which is a real place. But they don't give a lot of credit. And it sounds like original music. And I wouldn't say it's ruined by it, but the music is really very interesting. It sounds like it's an all-acoustic ensemble. It was edited and mixed and mastered back in New York, but it seems that it actually was recorded in this castle, Dracula, or on the grounds of where Dracula's real castle was, the real Dracula that the fictional character was based on. Came out in '96, and if you didn't know of the music connection, it kind of sounds like sometimes it's very acoustic, but there's a lot of electronic processing on the music that makes it sound otherworldly. And I tell you, it really very much sounds like a gypsy music. Maybe not the fast-paced, up-tempo gypsy music that you may think of when you think of gypsy music, but like a slower, more atmospheric. It's very original. And the music is very good, and it's interesting. It's really very atmospheric, and unlike anything else I've heard. And they don't list the musicians, they don't list the writing credits. The only thing I wouldn't say that spoils it is because they're keeping up with the theme of Castle Dracula. They do have somebody that comes on at various points throughout the recording, and they actually read some of the text from the Dracula novel. So that it's done really well, but it takes you away a little bit from the music. But the music is absolutely fantastic on this. It's very unusual and very original. Probably the most original music that I'm showing here tonight. And then there's this company called. Then we get on to Halloween music albums that are sold as Halloween music. There's this company, Drew's. Drew's famous, so obviously the guy that owns the company must be named Drew's. And for years, every music album that came out, regardless of whether it was Halloween or not, it was Drew's this, Drew's that, Drew's party music, Drew's Christmas music. And there's not a whole lot of information giving as to who the performers are, but they do reproductions of pop music, classical music. It's not compilations of the original artists. They do their own recordings, but they don't give credit to who's playing on them. So here's one, Authentic Halloween Music from the Crypt, this is mostly movie music themes that they've re-recorded. A couple classical themes, like Night on Bald Mountain, a particular favorite of mine, and The Hall of the Mountain King, which is all over the place on these classical compilation things. But then there's a theme from the movie Vertigo, orchestral theme, Pet Sematary, the Psycho theme from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho, the Dark Shadows TV show theme, Funeral March of a Marionette, which is the theme to the Alfred Hitchcock Presents TV shows, Toccata and Fugue in D minor, that famous Bach organ thing, Twilight Zone theme, that kind of stuff is on there. And I've got a bunch of Drew's things. And another one along the same lines, pretty much the same lines, Drew's famous Fright Flicks, which has a lot of the same tracks, except for they get into more modern movies like the theme from The Omen, the X-Files theme, the Jaws theme, theme from Carrie, theme from I Know What You Did Last Summer. These are mostly orchestral things or, reproduced, sometimes totally on synthesizers. Amityville Horror, Nightmare on Elm Street,
The Beetlejuice theme, which kind of doesn't really, well, I don't know if it fits in here or not. But here's another one from, this one isn't Drew's, but it's the same idea. Horror movie themes. So another Tubular Bell. Everybody does a version of Tubular Bells, at least like the first 3 or 4 minutes. These are all re-recorded new versions. And Tubular Bells in particular, I love to hear people do new versions of, because Mike Oldfield's done a million of his own versions. It's always interesting to hear when somebody takes that Tubular Bells theme, how close it comes to the original, what sounds they change, because, you know, synthesizers have changed a lot since 1973 when Mike Oldfield did the first one. So sometimes people intentionally choose different keyboard sounds than were used on the original, so I'm always interested in hearing those. So again, there's a theme from Carry On here. Again, the Alfred Hitchcock Presents theme. Lullaby from Rosemary's Baby. That's a pretty original one that doesn't show up in a lot of these. Pet Sematary, blah, blah, blah. Here's another one. Very scary music. More music themes. Again, the X-Files. But again, these are all, again, different recordings from the other ones I showed you. They're not the original recordings. They're not the same versions of the ones I just showed you. Somebody else is doing them again. Somebody else is re-recording the Mike Oldfield Exorcist Tubular Bells theme. The main theme from John Carpenter's Halloween, re-recorded. Theme from Friday the 13th, re-recorded. Psycho again. Theme from Poltergeist. Theme from Dracula. Jaws. Nightmare on Elm Street. Man, I got a stack here. It's probably going to fall over long before the video's done. Here's my favorite. People hate this CD. It's another Drew's famous Halloween movie themes. Very much in the vein of what I showed you. It's just all the themes that you see listed here. Scream, Jaws, Psycho, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, X-Files, Tubular Bells, Halloween, The Shining. I didn't, you know, some people are saying that they bought the CD for $2 or $3. Not me. I paid more than that. This is one that is the single album that I most associate with Halloween, because almost every track is 16 tracks on here. At least 13 of these tracks are played every year on the Music Choice Halloween channel when they play Halloween music. They pull a lot of these tracks. And again, these are re-recordings of the originals, and some people have said, well, it sounds like it was done on a cheap synthesizer, which I kind of disagree. Some of the tracks do have a thinner sound, like the version of Tubular Bells here, and the theme from Blade Runner, the Vangelis theme from Blade Runner, does sound much thinner than the original because there was no orchestra used. It was all done on synthesizer, and there's no dates, there's no performers to tell you when it was recorded, but those two particular ones sound like they were recorded using late 80s or early 90s technology when the synthesizers didn't sound as full or rich. But honestly, they did a great job. The way that they reinterpreted these, you know, instead of, you know, like the original recording of Tubular Bells had a real acoustic piano in it. This is clearly a sampled piano. It doesn't really sound like a real piano, but it really works. It has a different sound and a different effect in the music. So if it's attempting to sound like an acoustic piano, it fails, but in the context of the music, it works real well. But again, they don't list performers, and these are all re-recordings. The weird thing is, some of the tracks sound like they're being done by one guy, you know, all on electric keyboards, like the Friday the 13th theme, the X-File themes. Again, these are all re-recordings. The Exorcist theme, the Tubular Bells thing. Halloween, the John Carpenter theme they do. But others are full orchestras. And again, they're not the original versions, and yet they're clearly a real orchestra playing these. And because they don't give credit, I don't know where they are. You know, I don't know who they are, who did these, or where these were recorded, or, you know, where they're from. But it's a cool, and I like the film canisters on the cover too. But people, if you look on Amazon, have given this really bad reviews, but I love it. It got so many plays from the very first year that I discovered, which is quite a long time ago now, this Halloween music channel, you know, that plays on the cable TV. They were playing these themes, and I just love it. I love the film canisters with the skull on them. And this has become pretty much my go-to Halloween music CD. All the themes are short. They're not the originals. They're re-recordings. And I love it so much that I actually record. I've got about 72 hours right now on my DVR already recorded of the Halloween music channel. that I recorded just started like 3 or 4 days ago, and I just record it, and I watch it whenever. But I specifically look for the themes from this CD on there, and so far this year they've played 13 out of the 16. I think there's 3 that they don't play for whatever reason, but almost the whole CD. And what I do is I have a DVR, a digital video recorder, that records DVDs. And so I record onto my DVR, and I have a DVD recorder. So I'll record things like movies, especially Turner Classic Movies. I'll put a couple movies on a disc, and I have some time left over on a disc, 15, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, of unrecorded time. So I save these tracks that I've recorded on the music channel, and I I find out where they are in this music channel, which I've got, 72 hours of. I'll fast forward until I find one of these tracks that I like, and I actually will record that track on the end of the DVD that I'm recording, just to fill time. So you could be watching a movie, you want to be real lazy, put the DVD in. I've usually got 2 movies on a DVD. Let the movies play through, and if you're lazy and don't want to get up when the movies are over, you get a few songs recorded from the cable TV channel from the CD. And my particular favorites, I really, really like the version of Tubular Bells on here. And they also have the theme from The Exorcist 2, which is really wild. Ennio Morricone originally wrote the score. Of course, he doesn't appear on this. This is the re-recorded version of The Exorcist 2 theme, but that's a really wild, wild theme. So I actually use those themes that I've recorded on the cable TV channel, to fill time when I've got time in the end of my blank DVDs. Halloween Fright Night. Here's another packaging thing where they did 1 CD of movie music, theme music from a lot of the, again, re-recordings. But this is actually credited the 101 Strings Orchestra, so it's an actual string orchestra re-recording tracks from the movies: Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, Dracula, Jaws, The Omen, Hellraiser, Friday the 13th, The Shining, and a whole bunch of Psycho. 4 different tracks from the original Psycho movie. And then they threw on here the original black and white Night of the Living Dead DVD is in this package as well. And that's a movie that's in public domain, so anybody can put it out, and it doesn't cost them anything. That's why it pops up all over the place. I know I'm going long. So the one thing that I did forget was my Tangerine Dream Green Desert album and my Manuel Gotching Dreams and Desire album. But I'm telling you, they're good. They're Halloween music to me. And my vinyl, which I couldn't find. Now I'm showing you the last batch, which is basically classical music compilations, for the most part, not exclusively. I'll go to the exceptions first. Here's a thing by Nicholas Harncourt, the Royal Concertboat Orchestra. The only reason I play this at Halloween time is there's 2 very long tracks on here. Well, actually, one's long and one's 14 minutes. The 14-minute track is something called The Noon Witch, which is a track I had never heard of before. And it's an interesting track. And because of the title, in my mind, of course, I made an association with Halloween, so the whole CD gets pulled out and played at Halloween time, even though, with the exception of this 14-minute piece, none of the other pieces have any kind of titles that harken to Halloween. Good classical music stuff that the Dvorak piece I was totally unfamiliar with on here, which takes up most of it. But it's really interesting. Here's another original thing that has nothing to do with Halloween, but this particular Arnold Schoenberg, which I know pretty sure I showed last year. This is a nice package with a big, thick book in it and everything. As you know, if you know Schoenberg at all, he's pretty out there in terms of modern classical music composers that write a lot of kind of weird, hard-to-get music. And just the first time I listened to this, I was expecting it to be out there, and it is. It just struck me as being something very Halloweenish, and that stuck with me. So that one gets pulled out and played every Halloween. But if you don't know much about classical music, there's many compilation albums for Halloween that are pretty much entirely made up of famous classical pieces that weren't really necessarily written with, Halloween in mind, or even spiritual things, spirits and ghosts and goblins, but ended up kind of being used in movies over the years that became famous, and therefore have that association then with these classical pieces. So they get like the Bach piece, Toccata. This is actually a Reader's Digest compilation called Fright Night. There's a whole bunch called Fright Night. Classic Halloween music, all orchestral stuff. I guess this is newer than I thought it was. 2009, because it actually has a track from Pirates of the Caribbean movie. And the Bach Toccata in D again, the main title from Halloween, even something from one of the Harry Potter movies. So it's a fairly recent thing. Again, the Tubular Bells, so they do the main theme from The Exorcist. This is done in kind of an orchestral way. The Alfred Hitchcock theme again from the TV show. Dance Macabre excerpt, one of my favorite pieces of all time for classical music. Sorcerer's Apprentice. Night on Bald Mountain again, which is on all of these. This is, and here's another classical compilation. See, the great thing with these is that they're great introductions to classical music that are usually very cheap. They're usually very inexpensive. I tried to post up this album in its entirety the other night, and I got copyright strikes all over the place, and they never even put the video up. And I know because a couple of people got the notification that I had posted a new video and went to view it only to see that it's been banned in their country, which is not just the U.S., but I know in Germany too. So it never actually got up on my channel. So Creepy Classics again, a lot of famous tunes. In the Hall of the Mountain King, which is a great track. A Bartok thing. There's a few things on here that aren't all over the place on other things. Stravinsky, a segment from the Firebird Suite, which is pretty original. I don't know how to pronounce Saint Saens, who does a whole bunch of pieces that are on these albums. Witch's Sabbath by Berlitz. Mussorgsky, Night on Bald Mountain, that's on just about all of these, but it's a great piece. Dance Macabre, which is my favorite piece that's on here. Holst, the planets, Mars in particular, that particular track from Holst's Planets Suite. Mars, for some reason, always gets singled out. Well, maybe it's because it's the darkest sounding. That always gets singled out. If somebody's going to put something from Holst's, the planets on there, it's going to be from the Mars Suite. Here's another. There's a whole bunch of them called Fright Night under different companies that came out in different years. But again, here's Holst's Mars. Wagner, Ride of the Valkyries, which is a famous piece. Charles Ives' Halloween piece, which I'm surprised is a really short but very weird, like 2-minute, very avant-garde kind of classical piece by Charles Ives that is really cool, but for some reason doesn't show up a lot on these. Franz Liszt, Mephisto Waltz. Witch's Ride from Hansel and Gretel by Humperdinck. The Bach Toccata thing is on here again. The Alfred Hitchcock theme is on here. And the Hall of the Mountain King is on here. Dance Macabre, again, to me, no collection is complete without Dance Macabre. Just a great piece. And Mussorgsky's Night on Bald Mountain. These are great. Even though I have numerous versions of these pieces, they're just so damn good. And now we get to the last two, which have my favorite covers on them, which you're not really going to be able to see too clearly. But here's one called Witches Brew that went out of print and then came back in print and then went out of print again. This has a couple choices that are unique. There's a Tam O'Shanter Overture. I didn't know what Tam O'Shanter was. It turns out to be an old folktale. I looked it up this year. An old folktale written a long time ago, very much along the lines of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow kind of story. It was like a cross between a story and a poem, like a long poem that was apparently very famous, many, many years ago. And it was very famous and kind of well known. And years after it was written, a composer
influenced by the poem, actually wrote a piece of music. Sir Malcolm Arnold, apparently, according to this, was the composer, if I'm reading this right, and wrote a piece of music influenced by this poem called the Tam O'Shanter Overture, which is quite an interesting little poem story to read, kind of like the Raven, like a cross between the Raven and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, like in that field, Got Mussorgsky's Pictures and Exhibition, which is for some reason a big favorite, it seems, of these Halloween albums. Dance Macabre, again, the great piece. Witch's Ride from Hansel and Gretel, again, by Humperdinck. Franz Liszt's Mephisto Waltz, again. And Funeral March for Marionette, again. Faust's ballet music. Actually, not that you can hear it, it's playing on my stereo in the background, but I don't know why, I couldn't get it to come through to my mixer here. This is the album I actually selected to play in the background, just in case you can hear anything of it at all, which I don't think you can. And another one of my favorite covers of all time. I love that little haunted house thing. This isn't even marketed as a Halloween album, but because of the cover, in my mind, I associated it with Halloween, so it always gets played at Halloween. And also, it has the Mussorgsky's Pictures at an Exhibition, which for some reason, a lot of these other classical CD compilations were pulling various sections from Pictures at an Exhibition and playing them on these Halloween albums. In this case, I think it's the whole thing. It's 31 minutes long of Pictures of an Exhibition, so it's not a segment of it. It's the entire piece that you hear. But they also put on here Night on Bear Mountain. Again, there's a heavy Halloween association with that track. So even though this is not in any way sold as like a Halloween classical music album, you put Night on Bear Mountain on there and it kind of gets that association. And then there's a couple other things that don't really have much to do with Halloween, but they're pieces by composers that I either don't know or pieces I didn't know. Dance of the Persian Slaves, and another composer. There's something called Symphonic Poem, which is a really interesting piece by Mili Balkarev, Balkakirev, Balakarev, Balakarev, 1837 to 1910. This is all orchestra, really good music. This is 2008. Released 2008. I'm thinking a lot of these pieces were recorded, actually, and despite the fact that this was released 2008, these are old recordings, apparently, 1954, 56, 60, and 1964. Some of the pieces had never even made it on CD prior to this. That's a great thing about classical music. They don't care if it's old. If the recording is a particularly good recording of a piece, they're valid. It doesn't have to be the latest recording of a piece, and they put them out. And this, again, like I said, this is not marketed in any way as really being a Halloween music album, but with several tracks having associations with Halloween and horror, suspense movies, and those other classical Halloween compilations, it can't help but have that association. So I'm gathering, that's a lot of the Halloween stuff I have. And this is the stuff that is getting played by me now this time of year and will all the way until early November and even beyond. When I get depressed that Halloween's over and I want to extend it a little while. And the weather is still the same. It's still the cool Halloweenish weather. So, I'm sorry, I didn't put batteries in him this I don't have a live battery for Woody this year. See, I knew. I hit the microphone. And, I can't believe, like, as small as my place is, I cannot believe that I lost, I don't know where the electrical cord is to really make him come alive, but he's going to be around too. Actually, because I never put him away last year. So why would I put him away this year? So that's my Halloweeny thing. Guys, thanks for watching. Try to enjoy the Halloween season. If you're curious about a lot of the audiobooks
that I showed at the beginning of the video. I actually posted a lot of those little thin Blue Diamond audio books in little cardboard cases. I put all of those up last year, and they should be on my page. If you want to, if you're at your computer and you just want to listen to something but don't want to look at anything, they're up there. Okay, so I'll be back before Halloween certainly, and maybe talking about Halloween-ish things until the season is over. Hope everybody's doing well. Thanks for watching. Thanks for all your kind emails and messages of encouragement to me as well. And those who sent them, I know you know what I'm talking about. So I will be back soon, and I'll talk to you soon, guys. Take care.